Okay, this starts out with Chapter 16, the endocrine system, the first chapter that we're going to do in Anatomy 2, or Bio 202. So to get started, just an overview of the endocrine system. This is a system that works to make and secrete chemical messengers that we call hormones. And then those hormones interact with specific target cells, and it influences the metabolic actions going on in that cell. It changes what the cell is doing. They help maintain fluid, electrolyte, and acid-base homeostasis. They promote growth as well as regulating the metabolic reactions. Now I'm sitting here with a copy of your objectives for this unit, and this that we've just discussed would partially answer number 4. Moving on, how do the endocrine and the nervous systems work together? This goes with objective 1. These we ended 201 with a discussion of the nervous system, so it makes sense that we pick up 202 with a discussion of the other control system in the body, the endocrine system. They are very connected to each other, and they work together. Now the nervous system operates with neurons, and they secrete neurotransmitters that affect their target cells, and they have to be right there at the target cell. The axon has to be almost in contact, cross that synaptic cleft to the target cell. So they directly affect their target cells. However, the effects don't last very long, because as soon as that neurotransmitter is gone, the effect is over. So the stimulus has to be repeated continually for the effects to last very long. However, the endocrine system is different. The endocrine system is usually not in close contact with their target cells. They secrete these hormones that we discussed, and they go into the bloodstream, and then they travel directly to the target cells. And their effects can immediately happen, or it could take hours or days. It's usually a longer lasting effect than one from the nervous system, because that hormone has to clear the blood by going to the liver and to the kidneys before its effects are terminated. Now looking at objective 2, some of the chemical signals used by the body. There are 3 main types. Of course, the hormones that we talked about. These are known as endocrine signals. Paracrine, the chemicals are secreted by cells into the extracellular space, and they're going to affect cells that they are close to. They don't have to be the same type of cell, but they have to be close to it, because para means next to, crine means to secrete. Now autocrine signals, auto means self, so they're going to secrete chemicals that go into the interstitial fluid, but it's going to affect cells that aren't necessarily close by, but it's got to be the same type of cell, or the same type of cell type. Here you can see, this is a figure that's in your book. Endocrine, it goes into the blood, the hormone does, and it affects distant cells of different types. Paracrine, the chemical goes into the extracellular fluid, but it's got to affect a nearby cell. Doesn't have to be the same type though. Autocrine, it also goes into the extracellular fluid, but it has to affect the same type of cell that may not be close by, but it's got to be the same type of cell. Now this begins the objective 3 on your list. This is endocrine glands. Endo means inside, so they secrete inside. They make and secrete these hormones. And the ductless glandular epithelial cells, those are like the goblet cells in the columnar tissue, as well as what's in the glands. They secrete hormones into the extracellular fluid, and it gets transported into the bloodstream, because that's a characteristic of all endocrine glands. It's going to go into the bloodstream. And there's two main groups of organs here. We've got the primary organs that only have an endocrine function. They make hormones, and that's it. And then you've got your secondary organs that have an endocrine function, but they also have other functions that are not endocrine related. The primary endocrine organs are your anterior pituitary, which sits in the sella turcica of the skull, the thyroid gland that's in your anterior neck, and here's a picture of all of, well, never mind, I'm sorry. The parathyroid gland that's on the back of the thyroid gland, and you usually have 3 to 5 of these. The adrenal cortices, which is the outside of the adrenal gland that sits on top of each kidney. The endocrine pancreas, that's mainly on the left side of the abdominal cavity, and it stretches across underneath the stomach. And then we have the thymus gland that sits in the mediastinum above the heart. The secondary organs are the heart, the kidney, the small intestines, the testes, and the ovaries. These have another function besides just an endocrine function. And then you've got neuroendocrine organs. And the neuroendocrine organs have some nervous tissue in them. They're mainly nervous tissue. And they secrete chemicals that act like hormones. We call them neurohormones. And this would be the hypothalamus and the pineal gland in the brain, and also the middle of the adrenal gland that sits, again, on top of the kidneys, called the adrenal medulla. And this is the picture I was looking for a while ago. You can see the hypothalamus and the anterior pituitary, and then the pineal gland that are in the skull. And then you have the thyroid gland in your neck, and behind it there are parathyroid glands on the back side of it. The thymus gland is in the mediastinum. Here you have the adrenal glands that sit on top of the two kidneys. The cortex is the outer part, and then the medulla is the inner part. And then behind the stomach and underneath it is the pancreas. And then, of course, females have ovaries and males have testes. Now, I've started adding these slides that have a medical significance about whatever system we're talking about. Cancer cells also can make hormones. And when you have secretion or signs of secretion from these cancer cells, we call it paraneoplastic syndrome. The most common type of cancer cells that do this are lung and gastrointestinal cancers. The effects depend on what kind of hormone they secrete, but usually they cause imbalances in fluid and calcium ions and sodium ions. The symptoms sometimes precede cancer, so if we can diagnose it early, we might be able to prevent it better.